Okay, so imagine the biggest, wildest party you can think of. A party that lasts for an entire decade. Now imagine it ends so suddenly that the hangover lasts for the next 10 years. That's kind of what we're talking about today as we dive into one of the most devastating economic collapses ever, the Great Depression.
I mean, this was the brutal, shocking reality for millions of people. There wasn't a war, there were no huge flashing warning signs, just a sudden, terrifying financial earthquake that basically vaporized fortunes overnight. It shook the very foundations of the country.
Right, that's the big question. How does a country go from this incredible high, this unprecedented prosperity, to literal breadlines and total despair, seemingly in the blink of an eye? Well, let's get into it. Let's unravel how the Roaring '20s met its spectacular, fiery end. To really get the crash, you first have to understand the party. And the 1920s, man, it was a decade of just explosive growth and what seemed like endless optimism. The economy was humming, the jazz was loud, and people truly, genuinely believed the good times would never stop.
And why would they think otherwise? I mean, just look at the stock market. It was the heart of all this mania. Between 1924 and 1929, the Dow Jones quadrupled, 4 times bigger. It was like stock prices had just decided that gravity no longer applied to them. It wasn't about profits anymore, it was just about vibes.
But here's the thing about this party. Not everyone was on the guest list. While the cities were absolutely booming, getting electricity, new cars, radios, out in rural America, a very different, much quieter story was unfolding. Farmers were getting crushed by collapsing prices and massive debt. The party was really only happening in the cities.
And in those cities, a whole new way of life was taking hold. Consumer credit. For the very first time, you could finance pretty much anything you wanted. That cool new radio? Put it on a plan. A Model T car? Yep, you can finance that. And this whole buy now, pay later mindset even spread to the stock market, which was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire.
And this quote just perfectly captures the speculative fever. Everybody, and I mean everybody, was a stock market genius. Your barber, the bellboy, the kid shining your shoes, they all had a hot tip that you just couldn't miss. The line between being a seasoned investor and just, having a hunch, it had completely disappeared. I mean, when the line only ever goes up, who needs to worry about the details, right?
But you know how it goes. Every party eventually has a last call. And for the Roaring '20s, that last call came with the force of a tidal wave. The music didn't just fade out, it was sliced off, right in the middle of the song.
And this was it, Black Tuesday. And that description, wow, it wasn't just a fall, it was a spectacular, brutal final plunge. You have to imagine the scene. Ticker tapes just spitting out an endless stream of losses, phones ringing off the hook, pure panic on the floor of the stock exchange. The party was officially and very brutally over.
In just a matter of days, more than $200 billion in wealth, and that's adjusted for today's inflation, it just poof, vanished. And we're not just talking numbers on a page here. That was people's life savings, their homes, their kids' college funds. It was the hopes and dreams of an entire generation, just gone.
Okay, so here's what's so crucial to understand. Black Tuesday wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. It was the trigger. It's what set off this absolutely devastating chain reaction that would drag the entire country, and then the whole world, into a decade of darkness.
It was like the first domino in a line that stretched across the globe. So, first, the market crashes. Then, the margin calls hit. Brokers are demanding people pay back the money they borrowed to buy all those stocks. Of course, nobody can pay. So the panic spreads to the banks, who, by the way, had also been gambling in the market. That leads to bank runs, people desperate to get their life savings out. And finally, U.S. banks call in their international loans, and boom, the whole global economy gets infected. An American crisis just became a worldwide catastrophe.
A financial collapse can feel kind of abstract, numbers on a screen, but the human suffering that came next was anything but. The Depression moved from Wall Street right to the kitchen tables of everyday Americans.
Just look at this jump. It is absolutely staggering. In 1933, 1 out of every 4 Americans who wanted a job could not find one. 1 in 4. Factories went silent. The powerful engines of the American economy just ground to a complete halt.
This description of Dorothea Lange's famous migrant mother photo, man, it just perfectly captures the mood of the entire nation. Hope wasn't really a thing anymore. It was a luxury most people couldn't afford. The goal wasn't to get ahead in life, it was just to get through the day. It was about pure, grim survival.
And you could literally see the signs of this despair everywhere you looked.
People were forced to live in shanty towns made of scrap metal and cardboard, which they bitterly named Hoovervilles. Out on the Great Plains, a massive drought turned farmland into what we now call the Dust Bowl, kicking up these terrifying black blizzards of dirt. And in one of the most shameful moments in American history, World War I veterans who were just asking for the bonus they were promised were gassed and driven out of Washington by their own army. The country felt like it was completely broken.
But, sometimes it's when things seem like they're at their absolute lowest point that a new voice emerges, promising real action and a totally different way of doing things.
With those words, at his inauguration in 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, he signaled a massive shift. It was so much more than just a speech. It felt like the entire country was taking its first deep breath in years. He wasn't just offering new policies, he was trying to fight the paralysis of fear that had gripped the nation.
And he backed up those words with immediate action. A whole flurry of new agencies, famously known as the alphabet soup, was created. You had the CCC, putting young guys to work planting trees. The WPA, hiring millions to build our infrastructure. The TVA brought power to rural areas that never had it. And the FDIC, well, it insured bank deposits, which was a huge first step in restoring some trust in the financial system. They weren't just rebuilding roads, they were rebuilding pride.
And then came what might have been the most monumental piece of the entire New Deal, Social Security. This was a fundamental change in the social contract between the government and its citizens. It was a promise, a guarantee, that the country would provide a basic safety net for the elderly and the vulnerable. It was the government saying, simply, "We see you. You matter."
Now, let's be clear, the New Deal didn't just magically end the Depression overnight. The road back was long, it was bumpy, and its final chapter, believe it or not, wouldn't be written by politicians, but by the drums of a looming world war.
And you can see here, the path to recovery was anything but a straight line. Yeah, there was progress like the Social Security Act in '35, but that was followed by another sharp recession just 2 years later. Ultimately, the thing that really pulled the American economy out of this decade-long nightmare was the massive industrial production needed for World War II. That's what finally put the whole country back to work.
So, the Great Depression completely reshaped America. It created the modern social safety net and forever changed how we think about the government's role in the economy. It stands as this stark, powerful reminder of just how quickly things can fall apart and how fragile our systems can be, which leaves us with a pretty important question to think about in our own time.